For the first Sunday in June, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, could Stacey Abrams have a lead in the governor's race? Casey Cagle attacks Brian Kemp, and Johnny Isaacson scores for the veterans. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday. We begin with a poll that is admittedly from a campaign, namely the campaign of Stacey Abrams, but a nationally known polling firm. And it shows Stacey Abrams, Phil, with a 5-point lead over Casey Cagle and a 9-point lead over Brian Kemp. But what struck me was the 90% black support, 90% support among Democrats, and a big edge among independents. How say you?
Well, I always look askance at when both parties have their internal pollsters do this. The poll also said that 75% of the respondents knew who all three of the candidates were in the Republican and Democrat primary. So I don't believe that. I was talking to our former retired pollster, Matt Towery, and he says, he taught me this years ago, he said, you know, that just can't be. He said, now there are public pollsters like our own Fox 5 Opinion Savvy poll that got it right. And I remember the Abrams campaign didn't like that and said, oh, we have more than that. So I think that it's skewed. And I think we agreed just before we came on that it's a little too early really with these figures.
Well, it's really for the campaign's benefit.
Absolutely, and it's an opportunity for them to get a gauge on how they stand in the race, and when they stand well, they want to let people know, and it's good for fundraising, as Theron has pointed out. So I think it is very exciting to see that, and I think, you know, besides, she has had national attention because of the historic nature of her candidacy. And people may well know who she is, and they may well know who she's running against. And Casey Cagle has been around for a long time, and she's had run-ins with Brian Kemp, and she has prevailed over his accusations against her. So I think that people may well know who she is and who all three of them are.
Well, Theron, I think this certainly ought to light a fire under Georgia Republicans if they see a poll, because it's just not what anybody expected, right, even though the Republican nominee hasn't yet been chosen.
Well, it's a dual effect, and you just hit on it. So for Democrats, I mean, when they see that poll and they see it going around nationally, I agree with Alexis, it's definitely going to help with fundraising. It keeps the enthusiasm up. But also the effect that it causes is that it makes the Republicans to start their quest to try to unify immediately after this runoff is over. And so I do think that Stacey Abrams, because of the national attention, because all of the money that was spent on television, through mail pieces, through grassroots campaigning, digital advertisement, I think the electorate is very aware of these individuals. The other thing is, I think that you're going to see a series of polls, and I would really caution any campaign for releasing internal polls, because when you get that one poll that doesn't necessarily go in your favorable, and your opposite campaign knows that you have this poll and they demand for you to release it, you just got to be kind of careful about how you put polls out there in the public.
Well, the Republicans are doing anything but unifying. Here we have Casey Cagle running a commercial, spoofing a Brian Kemp commercial with the ever-present shotgun in the hands of the old farmer. And Casey Cagle is accusing Brian Kemp in his private business dealings of fleecing farmers. That's not a good look. Now, Phil, Brian Kemp's people say he was an investor. He didn't own this company that converted something into something.
Right. Well, it was a good ad, and to get it out of the gate. And of course, Brian Kemp now has to respond, perhaps with a comparative ad against Cagle in the Republican primary. You're right. A lot of the stations, including this one, have been doing fact checking, and you know, Brian Kemp never lost a license. The whole thing was exaggerated, according to the media that have been fact checking it. But this is what's going to happen for 8 weeks now, and of course, it's good publicity. Even though it's back and forth, and they're going to take some hard shots, people are going to realize these are the Republicans where they stand.
In the meantime, the Republican Party, not necessarily the two campaigns, began to call Stacey Abrams out on her finances and her back taxes, her debts, and they called John Watson, the chairman, and others called on Stacey Abrams to release her tax returns. She has an excellent retort there. Donald Trump hadn't released his. So I mean,
she does, and neither have Casey or Brian Kemp.
Yeah, so I mean, really, it's.
But if you want to be consistent, everybody should be releasing their tax returns, and so she should, especially with all of the heavy debt that she still has, and the question: can she manage a state government and billions in a budget if she can't handle her own finances?
She's certainly managing her own finances by taking care of the debt and using it to pay for her education and also to take care of her parents. And
Well, there's also the $84,000 though in
Yeah.
undocumented expenses in her campaign disclosures. I think that's a fair target.
Well, I think that all candidates, Republicans and Democrats, should release their tax returns. I mean, but unfortunately, we have a president who sort of set this precedent that you don't have to do it. But the other thing I want to strike on really quick, what really baffles me, Dick, is that the Republicans had a really good legislative session. You had Representative and Chairman Tanner and Chairman Beach over in the Senate and the House pass a massive transit bill, and we've heard zero about transit in the Republican primary.
You don't hear much about the tax cut either.
And we don't hear much about a tax cut. And so I just think it's very interesting that they have a lot under Governor Deal and Speaker Ralston and Lieutenant Governor Cagle to talk about from this past session, and just to not hear it being articulated in the Republican primary is very interesting.
Well, it's a good point, and I hope they do, and I think they will start articulating it. You talk about the tax cut, though, that the Republican legislature did. I was very surprised that Stacey Abrams, and you pointed this out last week, Dick, wants to do away with the tax cut. What's all that about?
Well, yeah.
I think she's concerned.
Following Nancy Pelosi, who wants to do away with the congressional tax
I think
cut.
she's concerned about how we can support education more than we have because of the devastating cuts that were made during the recession.
So she thinks Nathan Deal and the Republicans are irresponsible?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's not crazy because the state needs to support education. She also wants to expand Medicaid too, and that would be not only help people who can't afford health care, but also expand and take care of rural hospitals.
And cost billions over the next 10 years.
Well,
No, but it would bring billions in during the interim of those 10 years.
But also child poverty, to Alexis' point. We just read this week that Georgia is one of the worst states in the country around the issues of child poverty in the state. So expanding Medicaid and rural health care helps with the poverty rate that we know is rampant in our state right now.
all right, let's turn to the Lieutenant Governor's race briefly. David Schaefer in a runoff got the endorsement of Rick Jeffries. I don't know that means much to people know who Rick Jeffries is.
It can't hurt. It can't hurt when the defeated. It'll every little bit helps because turnout is going to be lower in both parties. Although it does help the Republican Party that there are these down ballot races, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State. That helps.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Jeff Duncan is not the other Republican in the runoff. Is not exactly a household word either.
And you got Brad Raffensperger and David Belle Isle for Secretary of State. That's going to push out, by the way, in North Fulton County, where these folks have their political bases. That'll push out the Republican vote in Fulton and Gwinnett counties.
All right. We've got some other runoffs to discuss, but first, let's take a break. We'll be back with the ever-popular PSC. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
We have a bit of an oddity in modern Georgia political history in that we have a runoff for the Public Service Commission between two Republicans, Tricia Pridemore, who was appointed by Governor Deal with her Cobb County base, and Dawn Randolph. Phil?
Now, let me correct you. Dawn is the Democrat.
Oh, she's the Democrat.
That's right.
So it's not a runoff.
No. Tricia did win her primary. You're correct about
just
that.
barely.
Shoot
And
me.
so she's the GOP nominee, and Dawn Randolph is the Democrat.
Okay, and there's a Libertarian.
Well, there is a Libertarian, but that's really probably not going to factor in. But Dawn Randolph won with 79% of the votes in the Democratic primary, and she won 100,000 more votes than Pridemore did in hers. So what does that mean?
People are skipping. But if you look at the ballot, people are starting to skip as you go down.
Because they didn't care about the
That's right.
PSC?
That's right.
No, but there's an argument to be made. The Democrats did better on the down ballot side than they have in the past. There used to be a huge drop-off, especially among Democrats. This time, people like Randolph got a substantial number of votes. Then the other PSC races between Chuck Eaton and Lindy Miller. Eaton, the incumbent, should have an advantage, but Lindy Miller was a moderate presence on TV, and she presents an attractive family face.
Yep, and she got 65% of her vote in her primary.
But there was a Democrat primary. Chuck Eaton didn't have a Republican primary, so his votes dropped off.
Yeah, because people
care.
skip the
People skip it.
unopposed.
But she won 157 of 159 counties too, so she's been very active in her campaign.
But she's got a really good background. I mean, beyond being attractive, I mean, she's really had a lot of experience in small businesses. I mean, she's a really type of different candidate. And I know we talked about Sarah Miko being a little different. So what we've seen nationally, you're seeing it here in Georgia, is a lot of women are running for office, a lot of first-time women candidates.
Eaton's got to defend his vote to keep construction on Plant Vogel.
Right.
Well,
And
that's
Lindy
right.
Miller,
And I think-
Lindy Miller can attack him on that
And I
all
think
day.
that's going to be the issue. And I think the Democrats have a weakness here because people want, clean, safe nuclear power and reliability with their electricity. And yes, there's been problems with Vogel, but it's totally irresponsible to try to undercut the project now. The biggest construction project in Georgia, and the Democrats want to undercut it.
Well, the Democrats haven't come out and said that they want to undercut it. What Dick is basically saying is that could be, and then Lindy's got to be careful with that.
They've made statements that trying to undercut Vogel.
The point is, we are paying for the construction. We, the ratepayers,
Yes.
Right.
are paying for the construction of Plant Vogel, and we're not used to doing that. We've never done that in the past. How about the school superintendent? By the way, all these jobs that we're talking about on the ballot should not be on the ballot. These
should be appointed?
appointed by the governor. So the school superintendent, Richard Woods, he's skated in the Republican side, but the Democrats have got a runoff. Sid Chapman, the old head of the teachers union,
And Otha Thornton.
And Otha Thornton. I love the name, but he's also retired military, which I also like, because he can manage things, I'm reckoning.
Again, another sort of breath of fresh air as far as candidates stepping up, and that's a big runoff for the Democrats because I mean it's going to be a lot of money spent, and at a time where education is so important in the state, that's going to be one to watch to really see if the enthusiasm sustains itself on the Democratic side in this runoff that's coming up statewide.
Richard Woods has a pretty good record, and of course we've had problems, unfortunately, though, the other side of the coin with third grade reading. We could do far, far better. You can always do better, of course, with education in Georgia. Yeah, the Democrats have put up some two good candidates.
And they're pretty evenly matched too. In the primary, I think one got 44% and the other one got 36%. So it's going to be a real contest.
Yeah, and I don't know if there are philosophical differences between the two. I guess we'll see as the runoff goes along.
The Democrats are hostile to the school choice in charter schools.
Yeah.
That's not fair to say that.
Oh, it is. Look at their website.
I'm hostile to school.
Well, I know you are. I know you are. They are too.
schools.
You'd like them.
You should run.
No, thank you. I'm going to stay in this seat.
Hey, Governor Deal, he's in Hollywood right now, plumping up our tax breaks for movies. We're the third largest
With Mayor Bottoms.
movie. Is she gone too?
Yeah, they were there together.
But before he left, he was able to announce 500 new jobs for a Korean solar manufacturer in Dalton and Whitfield County. I thought that was kind of cool. And he also said that Mayor Bottoms was off to a good start. He didn't think the corruption surrounding City Hall would affect the Amazon bid. I'm not sure they had any choice but to say that. And while we're on the subject of Mayor Bottoms, we missed our deadline. She has made a bold move to expand Piedmont Park. It's a $100 million plan with $20 million up front. That
From the city.
upfront money goes to buy a commercial tract at Piedmont and Moreau. But should we be using transit tax money to expand Piedmont Park?
Well, I think that where you're going with this is that the voters went to the polls and they voted for a
Transit.
project list, right? And they voted for transit. So I think that the mayor has studied this carefully. And this is a huge win for the city of Atlanta. She definitely deserves to be a winner this week for, expanding this pride jewel that we have.
I agree
in the city of Atlanta.
100%.
And so I think that the dollars can be spent in a way that I think, with the park being there, and so
But it wasn't on the list. I mean, we're all for expanding Piedmont Park. It is a jewel, but I think that you ought to go by the list, and you're making a very good point.
Yeah,
I'm surprised council's going along with that.
Well, I think it was in the works before she.
Kasim Reed had started to work
it
on
was
that.
definitely in the works.
But I'm not sure that the transit component was known.
But I think that she has some flexibility there as far as how the money is spent. So let's not poo-poo, Phil, on this wonderful
I just said I'm for expanding Piedmont Park, but I'm questioning the method.
And I'm surprised council is going along with it, apparently,
Well,
from what I've
that
seen.
seems-
All right, when we come back, we are going to tip our hats to Johnny Isaacson, who after years of work has finally gotten his Veterans Affairs bill through both houses of Congress. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And please don't forget us on Facebook and YouTube, where the Georgia Gang is searchable with its own channel. Johnny Isakson has worked through several administrations to reform the Veterans Affairs system. And he's finally gotten it through both houses. He's done a great job. And he was celebrating that this week. It's often described as privatization, but it's not. There is some of that, and I heard Senator Isakson say, we've always done that. That no, the government can't serve every veteran. Some of the services have got to be privatized.
Well, that's what he's talking about. In fact, Senator Isakson deserves a lot of credit, and so does President Trump, because we've gotten finally some great reforms just in the last year. Here's the big thing, and as a vet, I'm happy about this too. And what you're talking about, Dick, is the fact that now, with the approval of your VA doctor, you can go to any facility you want or any doctor you want to get treatment. That's the privatization. And so that hasn't happened. It was a bureaucracy that hurt so many veterans. So this is a great reform.
And it was bipartisan too. I mean, and Senator Isakson deserves a lot of the credit. But one of the things that when I worked for Congressman Barrow and Congressman Lewis as a staffer, the complaints around the VA hospital and the amount of red tape and the bureaucracy that our veterans had to go through just to get simple benefits, as Phil just mentioned, was just really, I mean, it was insane. And so this bill is so important, but I think that we got to continue to make sure that our veterans get the proper care when they come home from serving our country. But this was really big, and this is something that Senator Isakson is going to be a part of his legacy. I mean, this is something that he's known for in Washington, and this is the one thing that he sort of carved out as being a go-to guy that can work with Democrats to get
and
things
he's
done.
Chairman of the Veteran Affairs Committee in the Senate.
And I also think it was kind of a necessary evolution of the program, particularly in the wake of Iraq and Afghanistan wars.
Yeah.
You had hundreds of thousands of veterans returning who needed care, and it was backing up the system, and they couldn't get it.
Well, he fought it through the Obama administration and now through the Trump administration. I think it also makes a kind of a subtle point that despite the surface chaos of the Trump administration, Congress actually is getting a lot of things done.
Some things done.
Some things. Well, they got the banking reform, and they got this Veterans Affairs bill.
And it doesn't get the publicity from the mainstream media. That's the sad part, because we aren't getting a lot done, true, but we're getting some major things accomplished, like that banking reform of Dodd-Frank. That is major, especially anybody who wants to get a loan now.
David Perdue of Georgia was a big part of that.
Right.
Let's turn to something we only glanced at last week, and that's the Fulton County tax assessments for 2018. They hit the mail last week. I know of one person who got 110% increase in the assessed value of his house. Did you get your bill?
I did. I got, I think it was a $1,200 increase. I said before on this show, appeal your tax assessment if you're in Fulton County.
What does that mean, that $1,200? Is that a percentage? Is it?
That was the
You went up.
Dollar amount.
That was the dollar amount. Yeah.
Oh, and the amount of the assessment.
Yeah.
These were assessments that were based on 2016 rates, but then I think this is just really what gentrification looks like.
No, careful there. The 2018s are new.
New, yeah, but for a while.
2017 was based on
they were,
16.
Yeah, but the
So
thing
it's
is,
2 years of increases.
yeah, it's 2 years of,
Right.
of increases, but a lot of folks, because it was going through assessment. But I just think that what we got to really look at, for those of us who live in Fulton County, is that this is just a lot of gentrification going on. I mean, a lot of people are moving to this county because they want to live in the city or be close to the city. And I think that we got to make sure that the people who cannot afford these tax increases, there got to be some relief there for them.
And there is, there is. You know, on the ballot this November in Fulton County, you have got a cap that will freeze it, like you're pointing out, for 3 years. And there's also on the ballot, by the way, in Fulton County only, an exemption for seniors from the school taxes if you're over 65.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to say that, you know, and I've said this time and time again, I do think that people who make a little bit more money in certain parts of Fulton County, who live in more expensive parts, who are able to pay a little bit more, they, you know, we should balance that out for making sure.
But the assessor said there that the average increase in the city of Atlanta was 33%, and 1/3 of properties will see 50% increases. They haven't gone up 50% in the last 2 years. That's
There's
artificial.
still
They were
problems
doing
in
a
certain
bad job
neighborhoods
before.
with the assessment.
Right.
There's a distrust in the assessor's office, and there are certain parts of the county where there's just been some disparities that have been raised.
Right, and it's also recovering from the Great Recession where the values went under the table. I mean, went down below where.
Well, you remember they had to fire the assessor because of incompetence, and they're having to build back now.
Over in DeKalb County, we had an interesting flap. We had the ambulance service that works with the DeKalb Fire Department was taking, in one case, 56 minutes to get to a call, 38 minutes in another, and then 40 minutes. Then we had that video that everybody saw of the ambulance attendant beating up a 17-year-old mental patient. So Dunwoody declared a ambulance EMS emergency. Councilman Terry Knoll went to work. He's trying to carve out a separate ambulance service for the city. Michael Thurman finally stepped in, and I think he understands that the ambulance contract is not a good one, and it's going to be rebid because it ends this year.
Yeah.
But you know, city services, county services, lives come first.
That's right.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of a source here tells me that there was a very candid meeting between CEO Thurman and the company called AMR. There is an RFP that's going to be released here pretty soon. The current contract ends at December
31st,
18. So this is just another mess that CEO Thurman has got to clean up. But he had this meeting. You're right, he stepped up. This councilman out in Dunwoody, I think, is doing a little bit of grandstanding with this one particular issue, because I think that if you really look at...
Wait a minute, he touched an issue that the county was ignoring.
No,
The county's already assessed $1.5 million in fines to that company and hasn't even tried to collect them.
Well, but again, these were things that were happening under, the previous administration's watch. Once the CEO was notified of it, he immediately got to action. But you have this contract, and you got to get a new one out there.
All right, we got to get out. We will come back with winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we will begin that process today with you, Philip.
Well, my winner is the roof that's going to be open at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's taken a while. I think it was screwed up by Georgia Tech engineers. I'm not sure about that. I hadn't documented that. But anyhow, that's
like
my winner.
Like a true bulldog.
That's right, Georgia Bulldog. Brian McGowan, who is the CEO of the Atlanta Beltline, and his attorney, Nina Hickson, I've wanted to make them winners over the last couple weeks. They resisted bullying from the Kasim Reed mayoral administration, and they said, you know what, we're following the law and we're releasing our open records, and I think that's very commendable. And also, I don't often commend the AJC, but they do have some investigative pieces. The winner was the one on airport contracting and what a mess and cesspool it is, and it's up to the mayor of Keisha Lance Bottoms to clean it up.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to congratulate Gene Kansas of his new venture called Constellations opens this weekend, and it's an office sharing facility on Auburn Avenue, and it's the old Southern Education Foundation building. It's been repurposed, and it's going to be
Next to your family's old building,
next
right?
to the family's old building, which he also bought and repurposed. And part of the celebration was a lecture by Gary Pomerantz, who wrote Where Peachtree Meets Auburn, and the families from Maynard Jackson's side and also families from Ivan Allen's side, which are the two families that he profiles in that book, were present for a wonderful discussion about Atlanta history.
Okay. Sharon.
Sheriff Tim Pounds in Douglas County is a winner this week. He's really instituted a rehabilitation programs. He's trying to re-educate a lot of people who have gone to jail. He's implementing some battling addiction programs. So definitely want to give him a big shout out in Douglas County. And over in Gwinnett County, history was made. We missed this last week. Judge Rhonda Colvin Leary was the first ever, in 2018, first ever elected judge of color. She's an African-American woman in Gwinnett County. So for those of us that thinks that there's not
We missed it, I think, because she didn't make a big deal of it.
Well, I'm
Just
making
ran
a big
on her
deal.
merits.
Yeah, and more importantly, it's really a testament to the voters of Gwinnett County for the demographics that we know are shifting there. And then my loser's got to be Roseanne Barr. For the racist tweet that she sent out about Valerie Jarrett, who I had the pleasure of working with during the Obama administration.
Okay.
There's no defending it.
Don't forget Samantha Bee, the left-winger who insulted the first daughter.
Yeah, but there's no equivalent
It's too bad there's this
The only good
instability.
thing that came out of the whole thing was in a really remarkable press release, the maker of Ambien said that
Racism is not
racism is not a
effect.
side effect of any of our drugs.
That was funny.
Especially Ambien. We should mention, too, another fun election fact. Sandra Bullock got elected as the Democrat nominee for a state house seat in Smyrna and Vinings, that area. It's a Republican seat that's in play. And she dropped out. She said,
I don't really want to
didn't
do
think I'd have to
this."
go campaign. So Sandra Bullock, who was running, everybody thinks she got elected because she's got the name of the actress, right?
That seems to be what people recognized on the ballot.
And so there it is. But she's dropped out. And I guess the loser in the race becomes the Democratic nominee.
That's right.
And this is always in a state of flux. But I haven't gotten to say this in years, so I'm going to say it. As we tape Friday, your Atlanta Braves are in first place.
Look out.
Don't know where they'll be when you watch Sunday, but it's just fun to say. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.